our partnership. I think it's a great, wonderful, wonderful partnership. And I really do appreciate Gilboa Library supporting the financial wellness program here at KCT Credit Union. So I've made this session a little bit more interactive. So we are going to have a couple of more polls. So hopefully, like Sadia said, if you can answer that first poll there, it really kind of helps out the Gilboa Library, as well as myself, just to know how many people are actually watching with you. And then throughout the session, we'll have a couple more polls as well. In regards to the interaction, I'd also urge you to, if you don't already, have a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil so you can follow along with me on some of the activities. And if you're kind of a weird person like myself and like financials and numbers and calculations, you might want to have a calculator or your phone calculator handy as well. You can kind of follow along with me on an example that we're going to see. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to go ahead and get some paper, pen. Hopefully you'll find that you'll want to take some notes throughout the presentation. As Sadia said, I have actually been in the financial industry my whole career. I've gone from teller to personal banker to consumer lender to mortgage lender to homeownership consultant to a HUD approved instructor to now the financial wellness instructor here as well. And as Sadia said, I am very passionate about just helping people make informed decisions about their financial situations at any given time. And just like many other things in our lives, our finances change, not only based on our choices and our decisions that we make, but many times because of other issues too, that may be out of our control, right? So that being said, I'm a big believer in the more that you know, the better decisions you can make and the better prepared you can make yourself for those unexpected situations as well. So today's session is not very, very lengthy. We do have an hour here today with Gilboa. However, we may be a little bit short as far as the presentation. So at the end of the session, we'll go ahead and address all of those questions that you can plug into the Q&A or even the chat box between Sadia and I. We'll go ahead and monitor both of those. So any questions that you might have, go ahead and plug those in. Questions, comments are always welcome. Any questions that you might have in regards to your personal situation, my information will be at the end of the presentation. So feel free to go ahead and reach out to me. So without further ado, we will, there we go, make sure that our presentation works. So when we talk about personal finances, it can mean an array of things, right? It can mean, you know, my income, it can be my expenses, my monthly expenses, right? My utilities, it can mean my debt, my credit, what my goals are. You know, how much I have in savings. Do I have an emergency fund? Am I trying to save towards a down payment, a vacation fund? So personal finances can really include all sorts of things. And these can be, you know, kind of short-term situations, or they can be long-term goals like retirement planning, life insurance, home ownership, those types of things. So, you know, finances really encompasses an array of situations that we might find ourselves in. Today, we're really going to touch on a few that focus more on small changes that you can introduce to your monthly routine that can make a difference on how you might handle your daily finances. So we're talking, you know, your monthly expenses and maybe your debt that you currently have, and maybe some of those short-term goals. So we're going to concentrate on those basic changes in your basic finances. So I'm going to ask Sadia to put up the first poll question, and that is, what do you think is the most important financial document that you own? So some of the things that we'll cover here on the screen is we're going to, you know, talk about setting priorities and goals. We're going to talk about understanding your current financial situation, and that encompasses your income and your debt. We're going to talk about developing a positive mindset because we all want it all, right? And then we're also going to talk about the most important financial document that you own. So if you can please take a moment to click, what do you think is the most important document that you own? Is it your paycheck? Is it your credit report? Or is it your bank statements? And I think Sadia will share those results with us here. All right, so 100% said my credit report is the most important financial document that I own. I love to see it. Thank you for participating. That is absolutely correct. The most important financial document that you actually own is your credit report. And you can actually manage your credit report, just about every aspect of it. So we will talk about that towards the end of the presentation as well. So first and foremost, these days we're bombarded, right, constantly with other people's lives. Their successes and their triumphs are all displayed, for all of us to see, right? Whether it's on Facebook or on TikTok or, whatever your social media preference might be. And while it's nice hearing or seeing about our friends and our family or even perfect strangers' achievements, it can also cause us a little bit of self-doubt, right? Why can't I buy that brand new car? Or why don't I have such a fancy house? Or, why can't I go on that all-inclusive glamorous vacation, right? So it's easy to really start comparing your life to others. However, it's important to really keep in mind and remember that when it comes to finances, the images that you see are not always true or real on social media. So many times, those previously mentioned luxuries come with a pretty hefty price tag. And many times they're being financed, and a lot of times for long term. Unfortunately, they're usually put on maybe a credit card, or I'm going to take out a personal loan for this. If we're talking a credit card, that can be, upwards of 15 or 20% interest rates on those. So one of the first things that I wanted to talk about is kind of setting our priorities. This is probably my very first tip that I have for you. You need to really sit down and figure out what makes you feel better, what makes you feel safe, what makes you feel accomplished when it comes to your finances. Maybe jot down your top 5 financial priorities, okay? And again, those priorities should be something that make you feel safe about your finances, that make you feel better about your finances, accomplished about your finances. So it can just be on a piece of notebook paper, and it doesn't have to be right now. This is definitely something that you probably want to ponder, that you probably want to really think about, right? What are my financial priorities? What are my top 5 financial priorities? Whether that is, I don't have a savings account and I want to open up a savings account in the next 3 months. Or, my daughter is going to need braces and I don't want to finance them. I want to make sure that I have the money for that. So whatever those priorities might be for your household, for your family, write those down, okay? That would be your first step. Your second step is going to be to define each one of them as much as you possibly can. Put as much detail as you possibly can, right? So if my daughter needs braces, I'm going to go to the orthodontist that is right by my house. I'm going to go to the orthodontist that's right by work. I'm going to go to, I'm going to get 3 evaluations of what this is going to entail. I'm also going to get 3 different prices, right, of what this is going to cost me. I'm going to contact my insurance and I'm going to find out, what is my portion going to cost? So be as detailed as you possibly can, be specific. Once you determine what those 5 top priorities are, really, really write those out. Maybe your top priority, maybe you're at the point where your top priority is going to be to to buy your vacation home for the first time, right? What type of vacation home do you want? Where would you like it to be? How many bedrooms do you want it to be? What kind of price point are you looking at, right? So be as specific as you possibly can. This is really going to just kind of have yourself ask yourself some questions, right? What is important to me right now? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a very short term. It doesn't necessarily, you might be saying to yourself, you know what, I'm at the point where I'm thinking about vacation homes because I've got my home, my kids are all out of the house, and I have no debt. One of my priorities is to buy a vacation home. But due to my savings accounts, I don't see doing that, for another 5 or 6 years. That's okay. But this is really just kind of an exercise or an activity that will get those thoughts really kind of going, right? Because you need to know what your priorities are financially to be able to determine how to set your goals, right? So, a lot of times I've attended so many seminars similar to this that talk about setting your SMART goals, right? And you need to set some SMART goals. Well, how do you start that? How do you determine what your goals should or shouldn't be, right? Well, your priorities should determine what your goals should be. So when we talk about setting goals, these should pretty much go hand in hand with what your priorities are, right? So my goal is to completely be able to pay for my daughter's braces, right? Not have to finance that, not have to put it on my credit card, be able to just pay it off, one lump sum, or, be able to make those monthly payments and not have to put that on my credit cards, right? So your priorities and your goals really kind of go hand in hand. While we have different priorities and different goals, you might find that maybe they're not in line. And doing an activity like this might kind of bring them, to align them a little bit better. So your next step would be to set those goals. I would say out of those 5 priorities, figure out what your top 3 goals are, right? Whether those are short-term goals, obviously, any short-term goals that you have, you want to set those as kind of priority, right? So if little Annie does need braces, and we don't want any additional medical expenses at some point, possibly, then that should probably be a priority, and it should be a very short-term goal for you. Setting your goals these should be SMART goals. SMART goals meaning they should be very specific. Again, once you've set your priorities, you can kind of take the specifics out of that and roll those over into your goals. They should be measurable, right? How much time do you have to actually attain this particular goal? They should be attainable, right? While every goal should be a little bit of a challenge, they certainly should be attainable as well, and it should be, something reasonable. Are you going to have a goal of starting a savings account and depositing, $50,000 in the next year? That's not necessarily a very attainable goal for most of us, right? Not if we have to kind of put money aside from our paychecks every month. So it should be attainable and realistic, right? You need to be honest with yourself. Is this something that I can actually do within the next year or whatever timeline I'm giving myself? So that T is that deadline, right? Maybe I'm hoping that I'll achieve it in the next 6 to 9 months, but maybe I give myself a deadline for a year. And not put so much pressure on myself, right? So maybe it's a little unrealistic that I achieve it in 6 months. I'm hoping that maybe in 9 months, but I'm giving myself that year to be able to do it in. So setting your priorities and your goals, hugely important for answering whether, really maintaining and managing your finances is a priority for you. There's Plenty of people out there that are just kind of going along and doing as much as they possibly can. But if we're talking about really kind of managing our finances, really kind of maintaining our finances from month to month, that takes some time, and it takes some effort, definitely. And it can be a little bit time consuming, but some of these things shouldn't take a whole lot of time. Setting your priorities might be a little bit more difficult. Once you do those, of course, setting the goals should be a little bit easier as well. So one of the very first things that we want to do is, excuse me, I have a little bit of a head cold going on, so excuse me if I need to take a drink or turn off my mic to cough for a minute. So one of the very first things that we want to be aware of, that we want to be able to do, is know where we currently stand, right? Because in order for us to reach our goals, we need to know where we're at, right? If I'm at point A and I'm trying to get to point C, I should know that B should be in between there, right? So we want to know, where am I currently with my finances? It's very important that we know, how much income do I actually earn? And in comparison, how much income do I actually bring into my home, right? Because there's a huge difference between our gross and our net income. Do that calculation, know where you're at. Inventory your assets. How much money do you actually have in a savings account? Do you have, maybe a whole life insurance plan? Do you have any 401ks, any retirement plans, any IRAs, things of that nature? So do an inventory of your assets. Stay on top of that credit report and that credit score. And again, inventorying that debt and really kind of knowing where you're at with your debt and what you owe from month to month is also very important. So I'm going to have Sadia put up our second poll question here. So do you know how much debt you owe as of today? You say, yes, I absolutely know exactly how much I owe right now. You can say, I have no idea. Nope, haven't looked at it, don't want to know. And I think Sonia will put up those results here. All right. Wow, you guys are on top of your game. So yes, we all know exactly how much debt we have. That is great. Good to see. I actually put up a copy of the pay stub here. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is kind of figuring out where we are at with our income. So we all kind of know how much we make, right? We all have that idea, right? I either make, I don't know, $40,000 a year or $50,000 a year, or, maybe I'm salaried, so I know exactly how much I make, right? But when was the last time that you actually looked at your pay stub, or that you actually calculated your income? We all kind of have that idea, right? But calculating it and actually looking at it and doing that comparison of what is my gross compared to my net income can really make a difference, right? Simply being aware that there's a pretty significant difference, right? For the average American, the difference between our gross and our net is about 35%, actually close to 40%. So that's quite a difference, right? That means that if I gross $1,000 a month, I only bring home, and that difference is 30%, I only bring home $700 a month, right? So really kind of taking a look at your pay stub, whether it looks like the image that I have here or whatever it might look like. You should certainly have an area that shows what your gross wages are and then what your net pay is, or your net wages are. So if you are basing your lifestyle on the fact that maybe your annual salary is, say, $50,000 a year, and the difference between your gross and your net is close to 40%, that means that you're really only living on, a fraction of that, right? So let's say that you gross $100,000 and that difference is 40%. That means you really are only living on $60,000, not $100,000, right? So understanding that difference there is very important to allow you to make those kind of sound financial decisions. So if you're a salary to income, it's certainly easier for you to calculate that. You would just kind of take those annual earnings and simply divide by 12. But what I've put here is how to calculate your income, right? So many times we may not even know how to calculate our income. And of course, none of us would want to ever admit that, but I know that back when I started in finances, I was like, I don't know how to calculate income. I assume that I'm getting paid what they told me they were going to pay me, and it is what it is, right? I get a paycheck. I'm happy that I get a paycheck. But here you can see how to calculate your income. If you're paid weekly, if you're paid bi-monthly, or if you're paid bi-weekly. There is a difference if you are paid bi-monthly or bi-weekly. So bi-monthly, this means that you're only paid twice a month. So whether you're paid on like the 1st and the 15th, or maybe the 15th and the 30th, this means that you get 24 paychecks a year. If you're paid bi-weekly, this means that you get paid 26 times a year, because you're getting paid every other week. So that translates to in a couple of months, usually you'll get paid three times if you're getting paid every 2 weeks. So there is a difference on how to do that calculation. So that second one there is if you get paid 2 times. So if you, again, get paid maybe on the 1st and the 15th, or whatever the case might be. And then that last one at the bottom there is if you get paid every 2 weeks. All right, so calculating that and figuring out what is the difference. And at the very top there says calculate your monthly income, your gross and your net. Okay, so again, for many of us, the difference between our gross and our net can be upwards of 35%. So calculate your net. Really kind of do that difference, whether you're taking your net income and doing these same calculations here, or whether you're taking your gross income and your net income and dividing those, right? So you could take your net income every paycheck and divide it by your gross income. That will give you an idea of what that difference is there. So whether it's 30%, 35%, 40%, whatever your difference is. But really figuring that out and knowing that for yourself can really help you make some better decisions as well. So I would urge you to look at your pay stubs and calculate your income, both your gross and your net. Okay. And I want to take a minute to kind of acknowledge that, again, finances can be incredibly overwhelming for some of us. They can be very stressful. They can kind of give us anxiety and can be very time consuming sometimes. So I can tell you again firsthand that when I started on the financial career path, I wasn't very aware of everything that I had at that time. And with time, like I said, I've been in the financial industry for over 20 years. With time, I've come to realize that the more you know about every small aspect of your finances, the better decisions you will make. So, and the awareness of it, kind of keeping it top of mind, kind of pulls some of that anxiety out of it, right? While that may sound a little maybe controversial, right? Well, if I'm having to think about it every single day, that's going to give me anxiety, right? And it's going to stress me out. But once you are well versed in what you own and what you have and what you owe, it kind of does relieve some of that stress for you. It becomes kind of second nature as well. So the trick is to actually get yourself organized, and in whatever way that means for you. So I just wanted to take a moment to kind of acknowledge that I know that I'm kind of giving you a lot of information. It seems like for most of you, this is not anything new. Most of you know exactly where you're at with your debt. Hopefully, most of you know exactly where you're at with your gross income, but again, calculating that net income and that difference might make a difference for you as well. Taking an inventory of your debt is very important. So you all answered that you know exactly where you're at with the debt that you owe today. However, have you actually taken the time to actually make a list of that? Whether it's using a debt inventory list like you see here, and these, I just pulled these out of, you can see there, financially-minded-millennial.com. Is that second one. The first one came from Pinterest, actually. So there is tons of debt inventory worksheets out there that you can use. I liked these two in particular because while they are pretty easy to kind of read and look at, I know the one is a little bit blurry probably on your screens, but while they're a little bit more simpler, they have all of the information that you would want to jot down when you are doing a debt inventory, because you want to know what is your outstanding balance, what is the interest rate on each one of the debts that you have, what is that minimum payment, and do you actually ever send additional monies towards that principal? And then when do you estimate this is going to be paid off, right? So if it's a car loan, you may know exactly when it's going to be paid off. But if it's a credit card that you're carrying balance on, right? When do you estimate that it'll be paid off? Whether you're paying additional towards it every month, or whether you are paying that minimum every month. So kind of doing that calculation for each one of your credit cards will also be a little bit of an eye opener. And I believe most of our credit card statements actually will show us exactly when they estimate that it will be paid off if we're only making that minimum payment. So I'm particularly fond of this first inventory sheet that I pulled off of Pinterest. Because it does kind of help you engaging, okay, how long will I have all of these debts for? And really kind of knowing that. I would also urge you to, maybe you do the top list of your inventory as just debt. Debt meaning it's on your credit report, right? So your car loans, your student loans, your credit cards, anything like that. I would urge you to maybe do the bottom half of one of these lists as your monthly expenses as well. What do you spend on average for your groceries? What do you spend on average on your light bill, your electric bill, your water bill, those types of things. Though your expenses are going to be a little bit tougher because obviously our utility bills kind of can change from month to month. But maybe your rent or your mortgage payment would be a debt, but those other types of bills that you have on a monthly basis. Really kind of doing an inventory of everything that you owe is a great idea. And again, it's a real eye opener for a lot of us a lot of times, right? Much like the income, knowing how much we make. Actually, I always like to say when it's on paper, when it's in black and white, it becomes more real for us. And a lot of times, even though we may have an idea, once we actually see it in black and white, it usually is a little bit of an eye opener for us. So I would urge you to, again, and you can use worksheets like this, or it can be as simple as a notebook and a pencil, and just kind of jotting these things down. So. The next thing that you may want to do once you've calculated your income and once you kind of have an idea of all the debt that you have is figure out what is your debt to income ratio. So some of you may or may not be familiar with your debt to income ratio, but this is really just a percentage of the comparison of monthly debt that you have compared to monthly income that you have. Now, Typically, your debt to income ratio does not take into account any of your monthly expenses. So if you were to try to get pre-approved for a home, or if you're trying to purchase a car, your lenders are doing this calculation. How much debt do you carry compared to how much income you actually make? And they're basing this calculation off of your gross income. So again, it's based off of your gross income, and it's not considering any of your expenses. So your expenses, meaning your utility bills, food, gas, maybe childcare, anything like that. Strictly just your debt to income ratio. So I would challenge you all to see if you can calculate your income for the next 3 months and keep tabs on your debt, keep an inventory of your debt for the next 3 months. And you'll be well on your way to putting a budget together or a spending plan. So I wanted to kind of go over an example here, and this is where your calculators might come in handy if you chose to do the calculations along with me. But in this example, we have Bob, who earns a salary of about $60,000 a year. He pays $300 a month for his car loan. He has a student loan where he pays $250 a month. He also pays $1,500 a month in rent, which includes most of his utilities. But he does spend $200 on groceries. He spends $100 on his phone. And he spends $180 a month for internet and cable, and $250 in gas for his car and tolls to get to work, I assume. So in the example here, the monthly gross income translates to $5,000. Okay. If we're looking for his debt to income ratio, we would add all of his debt, which in this case is really only his car loan for $300 a month and his student loans for $250 a month, for a total of $550 a month. And we would go ahead and divide that by his gross income, which gives us a total of about 11%. So Bob has an 11% debt to income ratio, which is spectacular. He is a lender's dream. He has barely any debt. He makes a decent wage, and his debt to income ratio is at a very low 11%. However, that would be your debt to income ratio. What I would challenge all of you to also do is go the extra mile and determine your expense to income ratio. And this is how typically you would want to base your budget or your spending plan on, right? Because again, the difference between your gross and your net is so big, or can be significantly large, that you not only want to take this formula and calculate your debt to income ratio, but you want to take the same formula and calculate your expenses to your net income ratios. So if we assume that Bob's difference between his gross and his net is 35%, that reduces his monthly income. So his take-home income will now be $3,250, right? Because his gross is $5,000. Now his take-home is $3,250. So if I'm Bob and I'm looking to get financed, maybe for a brand new house soon, I'm thinking I'm in really good shape, right? My total debt is only $550 a month. My total expenses are $2,780, right? But this is, again, including my rent. It's including my groceries, my phone, my internet, cable, gas, tolls, all of that, right? So this is a very kind of generic example, but my total expenses are $2,780 right now, okay? Now, based on Bob's debt and based on his income, I can tell you that Bob qualifies for roughly a $1,900 a month mortgage payment, okay? That would put his debt to income ratio at about 40%, okay? Which is not real conservative. It's kind of in the middle. But that puts Bob at buying almost $400,000 house, okay? So he makes $60,000. but yet he's going to purchase a $400,000 house, or he's going to be told that he qualifies for a $400,000 home, and that his debt to income ratio will still be in line. Now, based on his gross income, he'd be okay. His debt to income ratio may be a little bit over 40%, right? It depends on, whether he's, how much he's putting down on that house, what his down payment's going to be. Again, this is a very simple example. We're not going to go in too much specifics, but if we looked at his expenses and we were calculating it based on his net, now we have a whopping 86% expense to income ratio, right? Because we're taking into consideration that his take-home pay is only $3,250, and we are taking into consideration all of his expenses, not just his debt, right? So he'd be at a whopping 86%. So 86% of his actual take-home pay is already just kind of going out the door. Now, if we calculate that same thing based on him purchasing a home and having a $1,900 a month mortgage payment instead of this $1,500 a month rent payment, that's $400 more. That actually bumps him up to 98% expense to income ratio. I may have lost a couple of you there. I just couldn't fit all of this example on here, but if we swap out his $1,500 a month mortgage payment, or I'm sorry, rent payment for a mortgage payment, that bumps up our expense to income ratio to about 98%. Leaves him roughly $70 a month after paying all of these things, right? So after paying his car loan, after paying his student loan, after putting gas in his car, groceries on his table, and all these other expenses, and having a $1,900 a month mortgage payment. So my point here is really to kind of look at not just your debt to income ratio, which is what a lender would be looking at, but your personal expenses to your net income ratio as well becomes very important. In Bob's situation, his expense to income ratio still allows him, to have some extra money every month. But if you look at our example, are we really taking into consideration any kind of entertainment? Do we know, does Bob like eating lunch out? Does he stop at Starbucks for his coffee every morning? Those types of things, we're not taking those things into consideration. Once he bumps up and transfers from renting a home to actually buying a home, he would only have $70 left at the end of the month for any of those additional little expenses that he might have. So hopefully that drives the point of the difference between your gross income and your net income, and why it's important for you to really do those calculations based off of your net income and all of your monthly expenses. This is where determining your needs in comparison to your wants is also going to be very important. So, let's assume that Bob's a single bachelor. Does he actually need a $400,000 home, or does he want a $400,000 home? If he really wants a $400,000 home, is he willing to, make some changes in his finances to be able to comfortably afford that? So there is such a thing as, or there's such a thing that is considered bad debt. So you can see at the bottom there, so debt is money borrowed, often for making large purchases that would not be affordable under normal circumstances. So debt is just the deferment of payments, which differentiates it from an immediate purchase, right? So if I was paying cash for something, that's it. I paid cash, I bought it, the transaction is over. If I'm putting it on my credit card, depending on whether I've actually paid that off at the end of the month, or whether I let that balance kind of roll over from month to month, that transaction is not really complete, right? It's continuous. So just the difference between good debt compared to what might be considered bad debt, right? It's been said that anything that you cannot afford to pay off within 30 days and does not add value or any kind of advancement to you can be considered bad debt. So I want to repeat that because so many of us are carrying balances on our credit cards, right? So anything that you cannot afford to pay within the next 30 days should not go on a credit card. You should not be really making that purchase, right? Credit cards were never meant to be a long-term financing option. That's why they are at such high interest rates. They were really kind of meant for that short term, right? Maybe 30, 60 days, pay it off. So when making purchases and putting things particularly on our credit cards, we really want to think about what value are they bringing to me? Can I really afford to make this purchase and pay it off so that I've only paid this base price instead of paying interest for this particular item? I would add that as you're doing your debt inventory, take a couple of highlighters and determine how much of that debt that you have is actual good debt, and how much might you consider maybe bad debt, and that bad debt is what you may need to work on, paying off sooner rather than later. And we do have a debt management session as well, so I would urge you to check that out if you haven't already. So your debt translates onto your credit report, which does affect your credit score. As you can see, the bulk of your credit score is made up of payment history, regardless. Oh, I forgot to have Sadia send our last poll. So it's kind of pointless now, but we'll go ahead and give you the answer there. So the answer is right on the screen there. All right, so hopefully everybody answered payment history, right? All right. So the biggest factor that affects your credit when it comes to your FICO score is payment history. However, I wanted to show everyone that FICO is not the only credit scoring model. There are many financial institutions that are also looking at your Vantage credit score. So these are the two main credit scoring models that are used. And as you can see, the Vantage score, your payment history, is actually the second biggest factor at 28%. Vantage takes your most recent credit as the largest factor on basing your credit score. So, however, what I do want to point out is that the Vantage credit score also takes utilization into consideration, whereas FICO does not. Utilization meaning how much of your credit have you utilized? Meaning, if you have $1,000 credit limit on your credit card, how much of that have you used? So if you are at $1,000, that means that you've used 100% of it. That means that your credit score potentially is going to be lower. So the less that you use of the available credit to you, the better, which really means that it kind of is factoring in debt, right? How much debt do you have, which is the second biggest factor for FICO at 30%. So to me, the utilization and your recent credit kind of go hand in hand, right? Because if you recently opened up credit, this likely means that you are going to put yourself into more debt, correct? Because not too many of us are going out and applying for credit cards just for the fun of it. Most of us are either applying for a credit card so that we can go ahead and use that credit card, or we're applying for a loan of some sort because we're looking to obtain something. So to me, that recent credit at 30% and that utilization at 23% can be kind of looked at as the debt that you might have, right? So that is a big, huge factor that is being considered. So regardless of whether somebody is looking at your FICO or your Vantage score, you know, those, how much debt you have and your payment history are certainly going to be huge factors on what your credit score ends up being. So one of the last things that I want to point out is that if you haven't already, your last challenge that I have for you is to go into annualcreditreport.com and pull your credit report. Now, these days, you know, there's lots of financial institutions and lots of credit card companies that are offering you a free copy of your credit report. Know that many of those are actually using the Vantage score, whereas most of your lenders are basing their decisions. So if you're looking to apply for a mortgage, maybe even a car, most of those lenders are basing their decision on a FICO score. So they may be a little bit different. The point, though, is that you know what is on your credit report, know where you're at, know what your credit score is. If you are a member of KCT Credit Union, hopefully you're aware that you can log into your account and you can see your credit score. You can actually see your credit report, and that credit score will update every 24 hours. So you can really keep tabs on your credit report and your credit score. Most, again, financial institutions, if you're not a member with us, you know, I would urge you to look at your financial institution to see if they offer you know, you that benefit as well. And again, a lot of credit card companies are doing it as well. So just kind of peeking in, taking a look, making sure that you're good. Excuse me. Can go a long ways. We're not going to focus too much on the credit, but I did want to kind of give you this comparison, give you this visual so that you can check and see, you know, and kind of know what your credit score is being based on as well. So with that, we're kind of at the end of our presentation. Just a couple of final thoughts for you. Again, credit cards were never meant to be for long-term usage. So as you're setting those priorities, if you find that paying off credit card debt is high on your list, you know, certainly reaching out, whether it's to your financial institution to do a debt checkup, whether it's to a HUD-approved counseling agency to try to manage all of your debt and look to see what might need to be paid off. Certainly, you know, making that a priority would be, you know, point you in the right direction. Again, determining what is your debt to income ratio. Lenders will determine your debt to income ratio, again, based on your gross income, not your net income. So doing that expenses to net income ratio is also very important. Keeping on top of, you know, how am I living, right? Am I living within my income, right? So we've heard the expression, are you living within your means? I like to say, are you living within your income, right? Within your net income. So taking into account all of those expenses is really going to hopefully help out to determine, you know, maybe you need to do some cutbacks, maybe, you know, determining your needs versus your wants, you know, needs to be a little bit more of a focus for you. Your credit report is, again, one of the most important financial documents that you own. So taking care of it, being aware that you have options on how to improve that credit report, how to improve that credit score, right? So kind of shrinking your debt could definitely help improve that. Payment history, as we saw in the previous slide, is also going to help improve that. So making sure that you're making those payments. The best way to improve a credit score is to eliminate the balances that you are carrying on your credit cards. Make sure that you're using those credit cards on a monthly basis and making those payments every month. So using that credit card and paying it off every month. If you can get to that point, I assure you that you will see your credit score increase very rapidly over time. So that would be my final tidbits for you. With that, I know that I saw a question come up. It says, my real estate taxes are high. Does that get factored into both formulas? It does if you do not escrow your real estate taxes. So typically your real estate taxes are included in your mortgage payment. If they are not included in your mortgage payment and you are paying that separately on your own, then certainly that is a separate expense that you want to take into consideration on both instances. Typically, if you were looking to purchase a home, like in our example, Bob, those real estate taxes and the homeowner's insurance will be taken into account for the debt to income ratio that lender is calculating already. So hopefully that answers that question. Excellent question. Thank you. Any other questions? Otherwise, I will flip it over to Sadia.